Alright, so in this video I'm just going to show you how to create a simple pseudo effect, apply it to a layer, show you some different options, but not really go into depth into anything, just want to show you how to get started quickly. So here, when you first open it up, on the left side you'll see the effect panel, and on the right side you'll see the control panel. The effect panel is made to mimic the effect controls panel within After Effects. It's not a perfect representation, but it gives you a good idea of what your effect will look like once it's applied. And then the control panel has all the buttons, anything that you need to add to the effect, as well as in-depth settings for all of your controls that you add. So here you can see the controls, and up here you can see the actions. Actions are things like undo, redo, apply, save, replace. If you look in the menu over here on the right, there's more options, and within the preferences, you can control exactly which actions show up on that main screen. If you want to get a little bit more room here, you can turn on just icons. For now, just to make it easier to visualize, I'm going to leave those names up here on the buttons. But you can save yourself some space by using icons only for these two first panels. So to get started, we're just going to start adding some controls. All you have to do is click on the buttons and you can see the controls get added to the list. If you add a group, you can see an empty group gets created, and then because that group is selected, any new controls will then be inside that group. And if I click on the little arrow, same as within After Effects, you can see that those two controls are now inside that group, and it closes it up. If I click on the background of this panel, the effect itself is now selected, so if I add more controls, it's then going to go below the group. As you can see, each time you add a control, it goes to the bottom of the list. It's either to the bottom of the group, so if the group is selected, it'll go to the bottom of that group. Let me add a different control to kind of see it a little easier. You can see it went to the bottom of the group, but it always goes to the bottom of whatever active parent you have selected, whatever active group you have selected, whether that's the effect itself, or group within a group. If you'd like to place a control somewhere in between, you can either add it and then click and drag on the handle. You can see on the left side we have these different handles. And depending on where you're nested, you can see this is the group's handle, and then this is the individual control handle. So you can take these and drag them wherever you'd like. If you want to add a control directly to a position, you can actually click and drag these buttons. So if I want to add a point control right here below this first angle, click, drag, and drop it right in. So there's a few different ways to add controls to your project. There's also a few different ways to move things around. Like I showed you, you can always grab these handles, move things around. If you'd like to grab a selection of controls, you can either control click or shift click, which have the normal behaviors. So shift click, I got two controls, I can shift and click up here, grab the whole selection, or control click to grab individual controls. And then you can just select any of these different controls that are selected and drag them to where you want them. And you can see that now they've all been dragged to the bottom or all been dragged to the top. So you can control your controls like this. Also, when you have multi-select enabled, you can see that the controls that are selected are highlighted in blue, and you have the ability to duplicate or delete the entire group. Click anywhere out of that to disable the multi-select, and you're back to normal. So to edit some of these control values, you can do it right in the effect panel. And what this is doing is setting the defaults. So once this whole pseudo effect is applied, you'll have the reset button at the top. And clicking on that reset button will reset that control to whatever values you set here. So that's the values you're setting, is just the defaults for your effect. So it won't be defaulting to 0 necessarily, although you can have it be that as well. All of these different controls, angle, point, checkbox, slider, etc., all of them have their own set of options. Some of them are visible in the effect panel, but a lot of them aren't visible until you look into the individual control options. So you'll scroll down, you'll see different options for each control. You can see as I click on different controls in the effect panel, all of the options here change depending on what's selected. So you can look through those. The help file goes in depth about every single one of the options that are available to you, but this is where you're going to set those controls. This is another time to show you another way to move controls. You can see that each control, no matter what's selected, will have the same 4 options on the left. Delete to delete the control, duplicate to duplicate the control, and then up and down arrows, and that moves your control up one at a time. So you can kind of see what that's doing. Same thing for the down. So that's another way to move controls, just depending on how you'd like to work. So once you have all the controls set up the way you want, that's when you go to start applying your controls. New in version 3, we have this replace option, which I'll show in another video. For now, I'm just going to stick to apply and save. So if we try to apply now, we get a warning that says you must have a layer to apply this effect to. So in After Effects, I'm just going to create a new comp and a new solid. So now you can see we have a layer selected here. And now if we hit apply, you can see that our effect has now been added to this layer. And you can see that because I have 12 set up here, you can see 12 is set here. If I change this value to anything else and hit the reset button, you can see it goes back to 12. And that's what I mean. When you're setting values in here, you're setting the default values. When you apply a layer using the apply function, one thing to keep in mind, and it might not matter depending on the project that you're creating, but every control, and we'll bring up the controls name and match name by clicking on this top bar up here. You can see we have a pseudo effect name and a pseudo effect match name. Depending on how you have things set up, if you're just applying this effect inside of a project and you're actually giving away the project file itself or using the project file by itself, you don't care about creating an actual preset, this match name doesn't really matter. If you are creating a preset that you're going to be, distributing, the match name might be something that you want to customize. When you're using the apply functionality, it does not use this match name. After Effects needs to have a unique match name each time, or else whenever you reapply the same effect, After Effects would get confused about if it's the new one or the old one. So when you use the apply functionality, the Pseudo Effect Maker generates a random match name. If you want to actually use this match name that you set, you need to use the save functionality. When you save, it'll create an FFX file just like as if you created a new preset, but it will just be the control itself. The FFX that's generated, and I'll show you real quick. So if I bring this up, you can see I just have some test controls here. Call this one tutorial, and we'll save that out. You can see all these other FFX files, and you save it. That FFX file is compatible with versions all the way back to After Effects CC, and it will work in After Effects CS6 and possibly CS5, but you'll get the little missing warning, which is usually what you're trying to avoid when you're creating pseudo effects in the first place. But it is compatible all the way back, no matter what version you created, and you can see here, I'm in After Effects 2020. You could open that file I just generated in CC 2014 and After Effects CC, and it will work just the same. When you save it out like that, it'll be using the match name you set. Another good reason to save controls out like that is because the Pseudo Effect Maker can actually reopen that control to start from where you left off. So if you need to do anything like that, where you want to maybe make changes to a control later on, you need to make sure that you save it out. The Pseudo Effect Maker cannot read controls if they've only been applied. So, like I said, if you need to be editing this control later on, or you think you might, make sure you save out a copy in addition to applying. Some other basics to go through. You can see over here on the right, we have this controls counter. You can see the maximum number of controls you can add is 254. Another thing to keep in mind with that total is that group controls and label controls both take up 2 indexes. So let's go into the preferences real quick. You can see we have these show control indices. This is useful when you're writing your expressions because you can refer to each control by its index rather than by its name. That's especially handy if you have multiple controls with the same name, like let's say you have a couple of groups and each group has the same controls within it. You might need to name them all the same thing. The problem with that is that from an After Effects standpoint, if 2 controls have the same name, it's always going to use whichever one comes first. So identifying controls by their index makes them possible to work with. So we'll save that. And now you can see over here on the right, we have this list of indexes. If you look at the group, you can see that the start of the group is 7, and we have 8 and 9, and then this control that's after the group has an index of 11. That is correct. The closing of the group, the end of the group, actually counts as an index. So every time you have a group, it's going to be 2 controls rather than just 1. That's also true for label controls, which are really under the hood just empty groups. So you can see here that we have 11 total controls. If I add a label, you can see it goes up to 13. And that is correct. And then if we add another control after that label, you can see it goes from 12 to 14. So keep in mind that although you do have 254 controls available to you, both labels and groups count as 2. So just keep that in mind as you're going through. Not that you'll necessarily have anywhere near 254 controls, but in case you get close to that limit, it's something to keep in mind. But that's really it for all the basics. I don't want to go too much more in depth, but I hope that showed you just kind of the basics of the workflow, and I'll see you in the next one.